Let's start the show. Hi, everybody. I'm Jen Williams. I'm with NAMI Coastal Virginia. For those of you who don't know, NAMI is a nonprofit organization that offers free classes and free support groups and programs for people who live with a mental health condition and for their families too. Please be sure to look at our website if you haven't already done so. We would love to be able to be of help to you and your families. I really appreciate you taking the time to attend tonight's program, From Jail to Court, Understanding the Process for Mental Health Situations. Times like this can be really scary for both those charged with an offense and their family members. We know that our panelists are going to be able to shed some light on this and alleviate concerns about what happens from the time someone with a mental health diagnosis is charged with an offense until the time they are seen in court. Based on the phone calls that we've received, we've created a list of questions that we're going to put to our presenters. Because of we're trying to keep the program length of about an hour, we're not going to have time for other questions, but at the end of the program, our two panelists are going to provide information on how you can receive answers to anything that wasn't covered during the program. We are so happy to have Dr. Kevin Cuffee and Vicki Davis on our panel. Just to give you some information about their backgrounds, Dr. Cuffee is with the Behavioral Health Division of the Virginia Beach Department of Human Services. He has 14 years of experience in the behavioral health field, and he's a licensed resident in counseling, a certified substance abuse counselor, and a qualified mental health provider for adults. As an adult correctional services supervisor, Dr. Cuffee provides oversight to jail educational services, jail diversion, mental health dockets, court-ordered treatment, drug court, forensic discharge planning, jail diversion, restoration to competency, not guilty by reason of insanity coordinator, and the jail and reentry services coordination pathway. Also on the panel is Vicki Davis, a program supervisor for forensic and state hospital service. Mrs. Davis currently supervises programs at the Chesapeake Integrated Behavioral Health Care Center, including the behavioral health docket at the Chesapeake General District Court, Chesapeake Drug Court in Circuit Court, restoration services, outpatient, jail-based and hospital-based, jail case management, discharge planning services for individuals with serious mental illness at the Hampton Roads Regional Jail, not guilty by reason of insanity case management, local and state hospital discharge planning, and court service for juvenile and domestic court. And I want to tell you, this is just a few of the things that they do and the experience they bring to this program. We are just so fortunate to have them tonight. We did ask Norfolk and Portsmouth to participate in the program, and they declined. Finally, I'd like to introduce the moderator for tonight. This is Corporal Brandon Mullins, who works with the Virginia Beach Sheriff's Office. He's going to be directing the questions to the panelists. So once again, thank you for coming tonight. Corporal Mullins, please take it away.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be doing this, and I'll start off with the first question. These were all the questions that were submitted for the panel. I understand that each city handles mental health cases a bit differently. Please walk us through the process from the time they are arrested until the time they are put into a cell.
Okay. So what happens typically is you get an individual who's arrested. They are brought before the magistrate so that they can get charged. Then they're brought in through what we call, booking, and they go through that process, if you will. During booking, they're going to get fingerprints, pictures going to be taken, and in Virginia Beach, not sure if it's every single jail, but for the most part, they're going to see a nurse. And when they see that nurse is going to do an assessment or an intake assessment, which kind of gathers background information about that person. They're also going to ask some questions that are related to mental health. And that's where they're really going to pretty much gauge whether or not that person has some type of behavioral health condition or background. In addition to that, Virginia Beach Department of Human Services has partnered with the Virginia Beach Sheriff's Department to start the Jail and Reentry Coordination Services Pathway. And what that does is that we actually have 6 clinicians who are housed at Virginia Beach Correctional Center. And what happens is that within 24 hours of their admittance to the jail, we go out and screen those individuals unless they decline to be screened. And what we do is we try to determine whether or not there is a history of behavioral health services, whether or not there's a history of substance use or co-occurring disorder. If we determine that there is, based on the screening, what then will happen is that we will schedule that individual for what we call an intake, and we will start to follow that individual as they go through the process, such as court and things of that nature. And the interesting thing about this program is most cities will follow those people who are residents, meaning that if you are a Virginia Beach resident, you'll get followed by a CSB or department or a behavioral health authority, if you will. What this program does is that it follows every single individual, regardless of their jurisdiction or locality. And we screen all those individuals, like I said, and bring them to intake. And so that's and overall, the essence of them coming in through the front door.
Wow, that was quite a bit, Dr. Cuffee. At Chesapeake Correctional Center, inmates with mental health issues are, during the booking process, they're assessed by a nurse. If the inmate meets criteria and or receives current mental health services, they're evaluated to determine if they're stable enough to be housed in general population or if they need to be placed in the medical housing unit. If they're delusional, suicidal, needing detox, or if they are a first-time offender who has not been incarcerated before, those are the individuals that will go to our medical housing unit. We do not, Chesapeake Integrated Behavioral Health Care Services does not have individuals in the city jail. We have staff that work at the Hampton Roads Regional Jail because the majority of our SMI populations get transferred to the Hampton Roads Regional Jail.
All right, next question. Is there a separate part of the jail for mental health cases?
So I'm going to say that when we have cases people who have mental health backgrounds or mental health issues, what happens is that, you know, depending upon the acuity of the case, will determine where they're housed. We don't necessarily make the determination for their housing. There's a department within a correctional center called classifications, and what they do is determine where people are housed. If a person is stable enough to go into what we call general population, then they will. However, if we know that a case is acute and there's some things that are going on where that individual can't participate or be in general population, then they are designated mental health pods where those individuals will go. And that, again, is determined on the acuity, whether or not that individual is symptomatic, what things are going on. And so typically the jail is really good with making special accommodations for individuals to go. And classification really works diligently to make sure that wherever they go inside of the jail, that it is a good fit for them.
At Chesapeake Correctional Center, we have mental health housing for inmates that are considered high risk, meaning they have a diagnosis, schizophrenic, bipolar, schizoaffective, PTSD, etc. These individuals are supervised. We work very diligently to try and get them to sign releases so that we can coordinate the care that they were receiving in the community and bring that same level of care to the jail.
Is every inmate evaluated for mental health issues?
Absolutely. For the most part, if they are agreeing at the time of their admittance to participate in being evaluated, then they absolutely are. For the most part, they will always be evaluated by the jail medical nurse. As I mentioned, there's a new program at Virginia Beach Correctional Center where our staff will go out to screen those individuals. Of course, they have the option of declining. What we do is that we, you know, if sometimes people will decline if they're symptomatic and there's some things that are going on if they've been off of their medications. And so sometimes they will decline to see us, but what we will do is we will still try to follow that case until they are able to connect and get medications and things of that nature to see if they stabilize. But for the most part, every person who comes through the jail is going to be evaluated for mental health.
And at Chesapeake Correctional Center, Everyone gets a brief mental health screening when they come through booking. If an inmate comes to the jail with a mental health diagnosis and currently prescribed medication, they're evaluated for mental health services and referred to see the psychiatrist within 10 to 14 days of being booked into the jail. Also, if someone comes into the jail and they're already on psychiatric meds, the booking nurse, records clerk, as well as the mental health provider will contact the necessary providers and pharmacies to obtain the current prescriptions. Once the prescriptions are obtained, the charge nurse or licensed mental health provider will ensure that the medications are approved by the psychiatrist and prescribed to the inmate. So we work really hard to try and coordinate that care because we realize how important medication is to individuals to help them stay stable, and the jail is a different environment than what they're accustomed to, and they may have more symptoms of their illness due to this setting.
All right. How hard is it to get a release signed in so many cases?
Repeat that one more time.
How hard is it to get a release signed in so many cases?
So that again is going to depend on, I see Vicki smiling. That again is going to depend on the individual, to be honest. My staff can go over and meet with the client and have them sign a release of information to be able to release and share information, and it go fairly quickly and it goes smoothly. However, you're going to have some individuals who are symptomatic, and because of their symptoms, they are paranoid and they don't recognize that we're there to help them. And so as a result of that, they will decline to sign the release. And so that means that we have to keep trying until they are agreeable to sign that release. So it just depends on the individual. And every person's different. Some people will say, yep, I'll sign anything because I want you to talk to everybody. And then there are some individuals who will refuse to sign those releases of information. And they might have just talked to mom on the telephone and still does not want the clinician or the jail medical provider to be able to talk to mom. So it just depends on the individual.
And I concur with what Dr. Cuffee shared. I also feel like we get the phone calls from the family members, and so we try and work with the family members to get the individual incarcerated to sign the releases so we can coordinate care, because it's important, because if we don't take care of individuals' basic needs, the chances of success are slim in the community. We want to make sure they have housing. We want to make sure they have their medication and services in place to transition smoothly from the jail to the community.
Absolutely.
All right. How long is it before they can see a psychiatrist, and how often are they seen?
So I will say that recently in Virginia Beach, we just switched from one jail medical provider to another. We used to be under a medical provider called NavCare, and now we are under a new provider. I think it's Medico, who's the new provider. And so we're still ironing out some things as it relates to that. I will say that that can vary depending upon the acuity of the individual. But in most cases, they try to see them, I believe, within 10 to 14 days. However, if they see one of the DHS staff who's a part of this program or the jail medical provider, and we notice that they're symptomatic and there's some things that are going on, we are actually talking to jail medical provider. The sheriff's office is talking to the jail medical provider to get them in as soon as possible. So it's never this thing where you have your loved one who is symptomatic, and one of the reasons why they're actually incarcerated was a result of some of the symptoms that they were experiencing, where they're just sitting and waiting. We try to connect them with that psychiatrist as soon as possible. And so that's the goal there. The time frame of how often they're seen is again going to vary on the individual. The individual who is symptomatic and their medication is not working, then they're going to see them a little bit sooner. But if you have somebody who's stable on their meds and not experiencing any symptoms as it relates to their condition, then they might not be seen as often as a person whose acuity is a little bit higher.
And I would concur with Dr. Cuffee's statement. We usually try and have the psychiatrist on board within 10 to 14 days when the more severe cases. When someone's stable, the wait time can be longer, closer to 3 weeks. Um, the other thing is that if the jail determines that someone's unsafe, a danger to themselves, a danger to others, or inability to care for themselves, then they can call the CSB, Chesapeake Integrated Behavioral Health Care Services, for a pre-screen to see, by our emergency services staff, to see if they need to go to a psychiatric facility for care. So that we do have that ability to go into the jails. Currently, we have computers set up in the jails so that we're doing Zoom meetings like we are right now, or using another platform to be able to assess the individuals and to keep everyone safe as well.
Brandon, may I interject just 1 minute, please? Somebody said that if you all could please repeat what you said about getting their medication and can they bring it to jail?
I think that might have been Vicki. Was that you earlier who mentioned the medication piece?
I'm trying to think, because I think it's another question moving forward.
So I will say this, that if you have a client who is on, because I do think that is, we may get to that, but if you have a family member who is prescribed medications, it will depend on the jail, and I'll say this, it depends on the jail and what's on their formulary. Every jail medical provider has what they consider to be a formulary or a list of medications that they are able to prescribe inside of the jail. For the most part, they try to keep every person on the same medications that they're on. As far as bringing the medications inside of the jail, it will vary. I was a mental health professional at Chesapeake Correctional Center for one of their jail medical providers, and there were instances where they were allowed to bring the medication in and the nurse would go through that and then they would use that, whereas in some instances they were not. So I would say that you would need to speak to the jail medical provider and they would be able to say, yes, you are able to do this, or no, and then they'll tell you the reason why. And in the most part, like I said, they try to keep people on the same medications that they're on.
And I just want to follow up with saying that we try and get the releases in place so that we can either get the medications prescribed from the pharmacy or from the doctor that's actually doing the prescribing. The only issue is that the jail medical staff have to agree with the same medications to be prescribed. And sometimes there is an issue with the formulary, like Dr. Cuffee had stated previously. So if someone were to bring the meds to us, we can have the doctor review it to see if we can keep someone on the same meds. And if for some reason we cannot, individuals are discharged with the meds that they brought to the jail. And if the meds have been changed, I believe they will at least have a 7-day supply of medication when they're released.
And just to piggyback off of that, there have been instances where we have had individuals who are incarcerated in Virginia Beach Correctional Center who have already been treated through our medical provider, meaning that they've been following up with Department of Human Services psychiatrists, and they were scheduled for an upcoming injection or something along that lines. And my staff has actually gone to our outpatient clinic and picked up the medication and brought it to Virginia Beach Correctional Center, where they've been able to give them the injection. So there are instances where they will take the medication from the outside.
And just to piggyback off of Dr. Cuffee, our PACS team, they have doctors and nurses that will also take the medication to the jail and make sure that they remain stable in the medications. There is a lot of times where the formulary is different in a jail setting than what is available in the community, which is reimbursable or covered by their insurance. So we try as best as we can, but it's not always a perfect match with the formulary at the jail and what people are able to receive in the community.
All right. Do they have therapists at the jail? How often are they seen?
So I will say that there are licensed professional clinicians like LCSWs, LPCs who are in the jail, and that will vary depending upon the nature of what's going on. For instance, the jail medical provider will have social workers on staff who will see their clients. On our side, like I mentioned earlier, we have this new program where we have 6 clinicians, and so our staff, while many of them are not licensed, they are qualified mental health professionals, and they attempt to see clients bi-weekly, and if not, at least once a month. So they are seen and they are monitored as well.
At Chesapeake Correctional Center, most of the mental health providers are through our contracted medical and psychiatric provider, which is WellPath. Chesapeake Integrated Behavioral Health Care Services do not have any staff that are in the jail 40 hours a week. I do have staff that will go and visit individuals that have open cases with us. A lot of those individuals are referred to us by their case manager or their outpatient therapist. And we'll go and we'll try and coordinate that signature for the releases, encourage the individual to be compliant with the medication, and work with that individual when they transition out to ensure that they have the aftercare appointments in place. We also receive letters from the jail, and my staff will go and follow up with a face-to-face for individuals who've reached out for services, and we give them information on how to access services when they are released back into the community.
And I think these next couple of questions you guys kind of touched on a little bit. Does the jail psychiatrist talk with the psychiatrist who is being seen outside the jail, and do they continue giving them the same medications?
So yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of collaboration that goes on between the jail medical staff and outside providers, especially if individuals are coming from the community and they are prescribed medications that have been working for them. And so absolutely, there's a lot of collaboration between the jail medical provider, Department of Human Services, even with family members, in order to make sure that those individuals are prescribed the same medication. I think the latter part of that question we've touched on as far as the medications that they were previously prescribed.
And over in Chesapeake, most often the psychiatrist is not going to talk directly to the psychiatrist in the community. However, if the inmate completes and signed releases of information, then we can get the information. And if we have questions, we can follow up with the nursing staff, with the prescribing psychiatrists in the community. Most of the time, inmates are given the same medication. However, there's some medications that are not allowed in the jail. For example, our Chesapeake City Jail does not have medication-assisted treatment for opioid dependency. And we have individuals that are on opioid replacement therapy in the community, and then when they're incarcerated, that would be something that they would be detoxed off of, and then we would try and coordinate services to get them back on once they're released back into the community. Some controlled substances usually are not prescribed in jail because it's seen as a commodity, that if people are cheating their meds, they can give it to somebody else, and so we do the best that we can to keep them on the same medication.
All right. Can individuals with well-documented mental health conditions provide documentation and have necessary medication administered without interruption when they are incarcerated?
I think the goal of the jail medical provider is to ensure that there's not an interruption of the medication, because if there's not an interruption, that keeps the individual stable, and that's what ultimately we want. And so absolutely, they will try to keep them on the same medication. Again, I think we said this earlier, and Vicki, of course, mentioned that if there's something that is on their formulary where they absolutely cannot provide, then that would be an instance where they won't be on that medication. But for the most part, if their information is documented, they're absolutely going to do that. And our jail medical provider utilizes a system where they can see what medications the individual has been prescribed within the last 90 days. And if they're able to see that, then typically that's what they're going to prescribe the individual from the jump, unless there is something where that individual communicates or they receive notification that is not the same regimen anymore, in which case they would try to modify accordingly. But for the most part, absolutely.
And I concur with Dr. Cuffee. We try and keep them on. If you have medical information and you bring it into the jail, you're giving us a jump start, because sometimes we're not familiar with the individual. They may live in another city and just happen to be doing something in Chesapeake. And, the more information we have, the better, and the sooner we can get the treatment on board, and hopefully with as little interruption as possible. And the goal is, a stable inmate is usually happier, less of a behavioral problem, and can expedite services with going to an arraignment hearing and working on getting back into the community.
All right. What happens if they refuse to take medicine?
So that's going to be, the same thing that when you're in the community, if you decide not to take your medication, if you refuse, then what the jail medical provider is going to do is document in their electronic health record that the individual has refused their medication. Of course, we're going to do our best to encourage that individual to take the medication as prescribed and help them understand the reason why they would need to take the medication, but there is no forcing the individual to take the medication. They absolutely can refuse. Now, I'll tell you, of course, what happens with a great deal of the individuals with this population is that they stop taking their medication. They become what? Symptomatic. They start to exhibit paranoia, hallucinations, and things of that nature. And so if it gets to the point where they're so symptomatic, where they're a danger to themselves or danger to others, usually what the sheriff's department is going to do is pursue an emergency treatment order to get that individual to a state facility such as Eastern State or Central State, where they can get the treatment that they need to stabilize. In addition, if they are working with a defense attorney at that time and they're symptomatic, then what's going to happen is typically they're going to request that the individual go out on a restoration order, such as outpatient or inpatient, to help stabilize them, because until they're stable, they can't actually participate in their defense. And so ultimately what they want them to be able to do is participate in their defense. And so if they're refusing their medications, of course they can't do that. And so there are various ways to kind of try to get them stabilized.
I concur with everything that Dr. Cuffee said. I do want to just make the clear delineation that a jail is a penal institution and a hospital is a treatment facility. And there's they differ very much. If someone were to go into the state hospital, a judge can order a court-ordered medication to work towards someone's stability, to then allow for, if they need education about the court processes for restoration services. But the key is you can't do much with an individual if they're not stable. The jails have no means to enact any kind of court order to, have the medication administered against their will. A state hospital can do that. And that's the big difference between a jail and a state hospital or even a local hospital.
If they are suicidal, are there special measures taken for this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If a person identifies that they are having suicidal thoughts, they are immediately put on suicide precautions. In most instances, they're given a suicide smock and they're observed, I believe, every 10 minutes or so, but they're placed in an environment where they're monitored with that suicide smock. And then they have to show a period of stability and contracting for safety and no suicidal ideations and things of that nature before they're taken off of suicide precautions, and then they're stepped down into an area where they're able to monitor until we can guarantee their safety.
Similar procedures are at the Chesapeake Correctional Center, and then, like I said previously, Chesapeake Integrated Behavioral Health Care Services can be called in for a pre-screen to see if they meet the criteria to go to a state hospital.
And Dr. Cuffee, I just wanted to add that it's Virginia Beach Correctional Center. They're on direct observation 24/7. So there is no, they're sitting there watching them the entire time they're on the precautions. Next question is going to be, what if a person is psychotic? Do they have to be stabilized before they see a judge? Will they be sent to a state psychiatric facility for stabilization treatment, then sent back to the jail to go before a judge?
In most instances, absolutely, you want the individual to be stabilized before they go before the judge, but that doesn't necessarily happen always. They can go before the judge and not be stable. At that point in time, the judge is going to recognize that the client is not stable at that time, and so they're going to be working with trying to get them stable. And as I mentioned earlier, that's going to be through that outpatient restoration or inpatient restoration, and more than likely, if they are that unstable, then there's going to be an inpatient process. And so typically that's what happens. And then once they're stabilized, then they're brought before the judge. And that's in most cases, yeah, so.
Yes, I would say that if someone's not stable, it's going to lengthen the process of the judicial review as a whole, because someone needs to be able to aid in their defense. When they initially go before the judge, the defense attorney can ask for a competency evaluation. And a competency evaluation would most likely be they would stay in the jail, and an outside psychiatrist would go to the jail and do an assessment and make recommendations to the judge. They usually have like 10 to 14 days to turn that report around to the courts, and the courts would then follow the recommendation of the independent evaluator. And they can, like Dr. Cuffee said, it could be on an outpatient basis. An outpatient restoration can be in the jail with a provider going into the jail to provide the service. On an outpatient basis, if the individual is bonded out into the community, they can come to the local CSB, or the recommendation could be for inpatient stabilization and restoration services, which in case they would go to most likely Eastern State Hospital. The laws were changed, and right now, if there's an order for transfer to a state hospital, it needs to happen within 10 days. So for the best, we do the best we can to make sure that happens. I will tell you, with COVID, there was a slight delay in that, but I believe we are back to the point where we're turning those cases and transferring them to the state hospitals within the 7-day window. Then at the state hospital, someone may be deemed unstorable, incompetent to stand trial. If that person is deemed a jurist, unrestorable, incompetent to stand trial, they can be civilly committed at the state hospital. There has to be communication between the state hospital, the community services board, and the attorneys and the judges, so that the charges can be null processed, and then that individual doesn't have an active detainer, meaning they would not have to return back to the jail, but then they can be discharged back into the community from the state facility. There are cases where if the offense is serious, the judge may determine that they want to review the case for a period up to 5 years. So as a CSB, we can pursue discharge planning, but we would need to have the permission and approval of the courts for the discharge plan, where the placement is, what services are in place, and then it is at the discretion of the courts, but either 6-month reports or yearly reports would have to go back before the judge about this individual's stability in the community and compliance with treatment, and then they can do away with the charges. So there's multiple different avenues that could delay offense from going from start to end, whether it be hospitalization, whether it be someone's deemed yours, the charges aren't released or null processed, but are held. And there's other scenarios, and it's probably going to be based on an individual basis with your loved one. And if you have questions at the end, I'll give you information. You can reach out to me, and I can try my best to answer your specific questions with your specific loved one's concerns.
If a family member has information about loved one's psychiatric or medical history, who should they be given to, and how quickly will it be reviewed?
So that's going to vary. I will say that if you are a family member and you have a loved one who's incarcerated at Virginia Beach Correctional Center, the fastest way to get that information reviewed and something done with that information is to give it to a representative of the Department of Human Services. And with us, we have 2 sides to that. As I mentioned earlier, we have got the jail reentry services coordination pathway, and the team leader over that program is Valita Hall. And so you could outreach Valita Hall with the information that you have. Of course, she's not going to confirm or deny that she's working with your loved one. However, she will be able to take the information, and once she's able to verify that there's a release of information in place, then she will be able to communicate with you, hey, I've received this information and this is what we're doing with it. If your loved one is refusing to sign a release of information, again, we'll take the information, but we won't confirm or deny that that individual is even inside the jail, that we're working with them. And what we will do is take that information and we may convey it to the jail medical provider. We may say, hey, listen, I've got Jane Doe here who's refused to sign the release of information. This is her mom. We've been able to have a conversation with her about this, and this is the information that we have. We might want to check it, something along that lines. If they are, we also have what we call our forensic discharge planning side, which is case management, and that staff primarily works with individuals who are Virginia Beach residents. And so we just had a new team leader who actually just started today. His name is Brian Joyner. And so if you have information, you'd be able to outreach him and he'd be able to give that information to the individuals who needs it. So I think for you guys who have loved ones in Virginia Beach Correctional Center, the best thing to do would be to get your information to the Department of Human Services representative. Otherwise, you can try to give that information to jail medical provider, which is Medico. I can't tell you how fast they would review that information because they have their own process. The fastest way, again, would be to outreach us.
Okay, we're a little bit different at the Chesapeake Correctional Center. Any family member can contact the medical mental health department to give information about their loved one. The charge nurse and medical health provider will obtain the information to ensure that the individual is cared for quickly. Now, with the same statement that Dr. Cuffee made, they're not going to acknowledge that your loved one is in jail, but they'll listen to what you have to share. And if they have the release in place, then they will be able to speak with you. But they're not going to say, they're not going to not listen to what you have to share. And if you drop off paperwork, they're not going to say, no, we're not going to take it. But Chesapeake Integrated Behavioral Health Care Services do not have people in the city jail, so it wouldn't be through the through us. It would be a direct outreach to the jail itself.
Would you explain why family members sometimes can't get all the information they would like about their loved ones? What would they have to do to change this?
So again, if there's information that they're not receiving about their loved one, potentially it could be because we don't have a valid release of information or that person is declined. So you know, we've got HIPAA, which is protecting that client's privacy and their rights not to have their information shared. So in most instances, if they are connected to us, that would be the reason why they're not able to share that information. Now, I mentioned earlier that at Virginia Beach Correctional Center, there was a changing of the guards, which means that there was one medical provider that they had who left, and now there's a new medical provider. We haven't been able to decipher what that jail medical provider's policy is, but I can tell you with the previous one, family members could call and give information. However, they weren't able, even with the releases of information, to verify that you are who you say you are. So in most instances, they were only communicating with other healthcare professions. So that could potentially be why. All I can say is that if you've been in that situation, at the end, we'll give out information where you can contact us, and then we can narrow down specifically why that would be occurring.
For Chesapeake, our medical and mental health department's required to follow the HIPAA policies as well. So there's a little limited information we can share with you. I believe the jails can let you know if someone's there or not, but they're not going to speak to their medical condition or psychiatric condition or any kind of personal health information without a signed release. But if you're just looking to see if someone's there, they probably will let you know that somebody has been taken into custody.
All right. Do you have a list of attorneys that are familiar with mental health cases that can be given to a family member?
So we do not endorse any specific attorney who has a history with working with individuals who have mental health backgrounds. I will say, as with in any case, as a family member, to do your due diligence and do your research to determine whether or not that individual has a background with mental health, whether or not they have a specialty with mental health. Of course, there are a lot of attorneys and I try to be as transparent as possible. There are a lot of attorneys who are gonna take your money. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have a history of working with that population. And so you're gonna wanna do research and ask questions as you would with anyone else about what their background is and how long they've been working with this population and how many cases they've tried with that. But we don't have a specific list of attorneys that we will endorse. If you specifically have a defense attorney, and again, we won't specifically endorse an attorney. We will provide you with feedback, and these are things that you can ask your attorney. These are things that they should know, that type of thing. But we don't endorse any specific attorney.
Unfortunately, we can't do referrals for any legal advice as well. A suggestion, though, you might want to contact the Bar Association. They may have some indication of some individuals that may have a specialty with mental health concerns and issues that arise. And that would be a starting point, as well as just doing your due diligence when you're interviewing potential attorneys for your loved one, that they seem to know what they're talking about and you feel comfortable with that individual.
There is no money for an attorney. What happens?
So typically what will happen is that the judge will have a financial assessment completed. And when you complete that financial assessment, typically based on that information that you provide, you are provided a court-appointed attorney.
Exactly. It's usually our public defender's office. And when times when they're overworked or overloaded with cases, we do refer to other attorneys in the community.
How long is it normally before someone is seen by a judge?
Typically, now I can't say because we're in a pandemic, so there's a pandemic, I can't say that this is going to happen always, but usually within one business day or so, they're brought before a judge for arraignment, where their charges are discussed and things of that nature. But the process varies, and so I really can't say for certain, but it just depends. But typically they're going to go for arraignment and they're going to be able to go before that judge to find out what their charges are.
Same thing in Chesapeake. Most inmates have video arraignments the next business day. And our general district court is running at full speed at this time. So our circuit court is behind, but our juvenile, domestic, and our general district courts are running full tilt. So it should be the next business day.
Before they're released from jail, are they linked to mental health services with specific appointments scheduled?
Absolutely. On our end, they are. That was one of the reasons why we started this partnership with the jails, because we wanted to make sure individuals who had behavioral health backgrounds were linked to providers. Now, I will say, with the new program, if you're scheduled to see a private provider, which means that someone outside of Department of Human Services, we will assist you with linkage to that appointment. But for the most part, we work diligently to try to make sure all of those individuals are scheduled and linked to mental health provider or substance use treatment. So we do the discharge planning and coordination to make sure that they're connected to prior to them leaving. The only way that they'll leave without having that information is that if there's a miscalculation with their time and they get out prior to, but typically before that even occurs, we've already had the conversation and we've already given them the information on where they can go. And for most behavioral health authorities in Virginia, like your CSBs and your Department of Human Services, we have what is called same-day access, where they're able to actually go into the CSB. And of course, because of the pandemic, there are various processes to that, and they can get an intake appointment or be seen by someone that same day and then get things set up. So absolutely, they are linked to services once they are released.
And in Chesapeake, before they are released, they have information about the services that are provided at Chesapeake Integrated Behavioral Healthcare Services. And we too have same-day access where they can present or call and have an intake the same day, as long as they call before 1:30 in the afternoon. Now, with individuals that we work with, specifically the SMI population that are transferred to the Hampton Roads Regional Jail, we do have a discharge plan with linkage for aftercare appointments. They'll be seen before they run out of medication by the psychiatrist, and we try and ensure that they have housing and their benefits reinstated for when they're released.
On release, are they given their medicines? How many days worth are they given? And is it enough until they see a psychiatrist?
So how much medication is given to them typically will vary on how much medication is left on what they call their med card with the medical provider. But typically what my staff does is that they make sure that the individuals who are being discharged have enough medications to last them until they see a psychiatrist. If they don't, then what my staff will do is advocate with the jail psychiatrist to get prescriptions, and we will assist those individuals with getting those prescriptions filled until they see the psychiatrist. But typically for us, if you're discharged and you're going to see one of our psychiatrists, you're typically seen within 7 days. So if you have a 7-day supply of medication, we're working with that until you see your psychiatrist. But again, we recognize that one of the reasons some people are cycling through the incarceration settings because they're not on their medication and they're symptomatic at the time and things of that nature. So for us, it is a priority to make sure that they have medications and what they need once they're transitioning back into the community.
And Chesapeake Correctional Center, the individuals are released with the 7-day supply of medication. For our individuals who are sent to Hampton Roads Regional Jail that are a part of the project that we're working over there, they will have 14-day supply of medication, and their medication, both medical and psychiatric refills, can be called into our pharmacy, which is in our building, and the grant that we are working with can cover the cost of that. But we try very diligently to have their entitlements back in place for when they walk out the door so that they have their own Medicaid coverage or Medicare coverage and in place so that they can take care of the cost and be responsible for their own care.
Right. Are they released to a specific address or shelter, or are they released to the street?
So let me start off by saying this, that your loved one can choose. We can make all the recommendations that we want. However, they can choose to say, I'm not going to the placement that you've identified. And so it may appear as though somebody might have been released to the street or what have you, but they've just declined the service or the placement that we provided. In most instances, we are never going to discharge anybody to the street. We will explore every housing option that we have in order to place that individual. However, if there is not a placement that is willing to accept the individual for varying reasons, then we will make our best attempt to refer them to a shelter and make sure that they have placement. But for the most part, we're never going to discharge anybody to the street. But again, at the same time, you got to remember that they also have the option on what they want to do when they leave. And so we very well could offer them housing. We very well could offer them placements that they decline because that's not something that they are agreeable to. And they may show up to their appointments, but they will refuse the housing that we are offering. So, but absolutely, the goal is never for us to discharge anybody to the streets.
At the Chesapeake Correctional Center, we do not have staff in there to look at transitional planning as they release from jail back to the community. We do provide them with information about how to access services. Most of the inmates are released to the street unless they're accepted into a program or order has been put in place for another institute or facility. Sometimes, especially on the substance use side of the house, we'll have people released to a residential treatment program that is ordered through the courts. But for individuals at the Hampton Roads Regional Jail that are open to discharge planning, we try and rely on the natural resources because most everyone was staying someplace before they came in. So we work with those individuals to keep those relationships and build those relationships to try and look at what resources they really do have available to them. But we also will explore residential placements through assisted living facilities, if appropriate, other type of mental health skill building homes and houses that also provide a service as well as a place to live. So we do what we can to try and ensure that people are not released to the street for individuals at the Hampton Roads Regional Jail with a SMI diagnosis.
Is there a specific time of day / night when they are released?
So, so how that works is that the jail or the Department of Corrections determines a person's time served, if you will. For the most part, if a person is involved or enrolled in our services, we will advocate for them to be released during service provision hours, where we know that there are staff that are going to be available, as well as during periods of times where we know that that individual has access to the bus route. However, again, if we're not involved in that case and we're not there to advocate, they could be released after service provision hours, simply because the jail cannot hold them longer than their time served. It is a violation of their rights to be held any longer than their time that has been served. And so if we advocate, then of course they're released during those service provision hours. However, if it's someone who has not needed our services and things of that nature, then they may get out during a period of time that is after hours. Again, because that would be a violation of their rights to hold them any longer.
Okay, in Chesapeake, inmates are released at all hours depending on the type of release it is. If they're bonded out, they usually are released as soon as the bond is posted. Court-ordered and sentence-served releases typically happen in the morning. Now, if we are part of a plan for someone, say, at the Hampton Roads Regional Jail that's going before the judge and they're getting sentenced to time served or something of that nature, we usually will ask the judge to release the person the following day into our custody so that we can execute the discharge plan that we have put in place. The way it works at the Hampton Roads Regional Jail is in the morning, they will take anybody that has court dates, and then they would take them to Hampton, to Norfolk, to Portsmouth, Virginia Beach, and just do a round robin and deliver people that need to go to court. Then they wait until the end of the day and do that circuit again where they pick everybody up and get them back into the Hampton Roads Regional Jail. So because of that and the way it's structured, the release would happen most likely very late in the evening, and there would be no supports in place for that individual. So instead of having someone released to the street we can give them bus passes, but like Dr. Cuffee said, if the buses aren't running, that doesn't do them a lot of good. And most times, our goal is to break that cycle where someone keeps going back to jail and try and set them up with the supports that they need in the community so that they can have a chance of being successful. Roof over their head, medication, aftercare, treatments, appointments set in place. So when we can intervene, we can. Sometimes there are people who, like Dr. Cuffee was saying, the Department of Corrections calculates time. And sometimes they find out, oops, this person, we have to release them. We can't hold them here any longer. So in those incidents, we try and get them to, they always have bus passes in their personal property when they're being released. And then they have their contact information or their discharge plan as far as probation and parole if they have to report, community corrections if they have to report, how to get in contact with my staff, as well as the address and times for intakes and things of that nature. So I hope that there's a difference between the two jails, and one we're involved much heavier with, and we are in there, and our city jail, we just aren't there yet. So.
I do want to add for Virginia Beach Correctional Center, if we know the release date is coming up, we will release them at 8 o'clock in the morning usually. And as it was stated, if DOC gives us a call and lets us know that somebody's going to be released, then we release them the moment we get that order. We get them out of there. All right, second to last question here. How does jail diversion work? Who is eligible?
So jail diversion, there's what is called the sequential intercept model that goes through 5 phases. And so I would say that jail diversion is pretty much trying to divert the individual into some form of treatment at any point during that stage, if you will. And so you may get somebody who comes in through booking and connects with us, and we realize this person is going to be best treated at a local inpatient. They're not going to do well here in this setting. And so we may advocate on that client's behalf to say, hey, we've contacted emergency services, and emergency services has found a local hospital that will take this person if this person is bonded out. And we may go before the judge and say, hey, judge, we have this person who our emergency services department has assessed this individual, and they have been, if you bond them out, this hospital is willing to take them, depending upon the nature of the charge. I want to put that out there. Depending upon the nature of the charge or whether or not the judge is agreeable to do that. That's considered to be, your diversion, diverting them from jail back into treatment, things of that nature. And so that's one aspect of jail diversion. If you're talking about jail diversion as it relates to funding stream, various localities have certain funds that are available to them, and I will say that they are limited funds that are available to them to assist with providing support to individuals. For us in our city, you have to be a Virginia Beach resident, have to be somebody who's enrolled in forensic case management, discharge planning services, and is going to connect to outpatient services once you're out. And if you're determining or want to know whether or not that your family member is qualified for that, you certainly can give us a call and we can kind of walk you through that process. And then once they are enrolled in forensic discharge planning, based on what the individual's need is, we may be able to provide support with medication. We may be able to provide support with temporary housing. And so it just depends on what's going on with that individual. And of course, it's a case by case, so you can certainly give us a call and we can go over that. So I'm hoping that I'm answering your question as it relates to jail diversion and how that process works with us.
In Chesapeake, we do not have staff that advocate at the magistrate's hearing for diversion. We do have staff. Our emergency services will assess anybody coming into the jail from booking with a call to us. If they feel that they need to go to a mental hospital, then we do the assessment, and if appropriately, we'll get them to a mental hospital for appropriate treatment. We do use our mental health docket as well as drug court as diversion, in that in lieu of a sentence, they are able to come into a program that is court ordered that can help them receive the treatment that they need, as well as the oversight and monitoring to hopefully give them every opportunity to be successful in their recovery. Our mental health docket is in our general district court, and it is a pre-plea docket. So instead of getting sentenced, someone could volunteer to come into our program if they're appropriate for it. We work on getting them housing, getting them stable on medication, and the goal is to keep them in the community, as well as change their relationship with the courts. The court team is made up of the judge. We have a representative from the public defender's office, from community correction agency, and at times the Commonwealth attorney is a part of this as well. And most times when an individual goes before the court, it seems to be that we're at opposite ends. It's us against them. And basically, the members of the court team are invested in this individual's success, and really wants to take the time to sit down and really find out how they're doing, what they did for the day. Are they watching, the football games on the weekends, or how they're passing their time, and just trying to build a relationship with the individuals because we care about them. And we want to assist them in breaking the cycle of going in and out of jail, or revolving door. So that is in our general district court. And then in our circuit court, we have drug court. Drug court is also comprised of a team approach with a judge. We have the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, as well as probation and parole. The police are represented on our team. The public defender's office is represented on our team. We have clinical staff from the Community Services Board or CIBH that's a part of the team. And we meet weekly, and we have court weekly to go over individuals' progress in the program. For the drug court, people have to be eligible, and that is a screening that's done by our Commonwealth attorney, because basically the Commonwealth attorney is making a plea bargain with the individual, and someone has to sign and understand that they are committing themselves to the drug court program, and if they're unsuccessful, they are facing a fixed amount of time in jail. So we want to make sure that they understand what they're getting themselves into and what it means. We are able to work with individuals to provide medication-assisted treatment. Just recently in July, Chesapeake Integrated Behavioral Healthcare started OBOT clinic. It's for opioid dependence, and we're able to prescribe Suboxone and Vivitrol. And we get referrals currently from Chesapeake Regional Medical Center, as well as other private providers. When somebody may be introduced in other venues in the private sector, they can come to us for their ongoing treatment. We're not at the point where we're doing introductions at this point, but we will hopefully be there shortly. We also are have grant funding to be able to start medication-assisted treatment in the Chesapeake Correctional Center prior to someone being released, so that they will have the MAT or the medication treatment on board before they're released in the community. Our goal with this is to try and decrease the number of overdoses that happen with this population when they're released back into the community. So we're doing a couple different things. I hope that kind of covers what you were looking for in this question. Like Dr. Cuffee said, it's kind of very vague. So if that's not, and I missed the target of the intent of the question, like I said, when we're finished, I'll give you my contact information. You can reach out to me and get some more information.
And this will be the last question. Who would family members speak with at the jail if they have questions or need guidance?
Yeah, again, if family members have questions about who they would speak with at the jail, I'm going to say that question depends on what's going on. Of course, we get calls in our office all the time about various situations that are happening with their loved one inside the jail. We'll get a phone call about my loved one called me. He said that he didn't get rec time, or he said that his canteen didn't come. Those are not the type of questions that my office will be able to answer. So you need to be able to contact the jail directly, and they may be able to point you in the right direction on who you would need to speak to as it relates to that. So there's what we consider to be security, and then there's also the treatment side of things. And so any security related question or things of that nature, you'll need to contact the jail directly, and they'll be able to point you in the right direction on who you would need to speak to as it relates to that. If there's an issue related to your client's mental health, certainly you can contact the jail medical provider, or you can give us a call here at the Department of Human Services with the City of Virginia Beach. And of course, we'll give our information at the end of that, but you can do that as well. And then if all else fails and you're uncertain about who you call, certainly give us a call, and we'll try to point you guys in the right direction on who you would need to speak to.
Exactly. I don't have staff in the Chesapeake Correctional Center on a daily basis. So if it's someone that's housed in the Chesapeake Correction Center, then a member of medical and mental health staff, classification deputy, and it just depends on the nature of the question that you're inquiring about. If you're not able to get what you need, you can reach out to me definitely, and I will try and get the answers, because I know everyone's concerned about a loved one, and I would be concerned if it was my loved one in there, and I'd try and get want to make sure that they were safe and they had the treatment they needed, or at least it was offered to them and available, with the understanding that it's the right to refuse treatment or the right to refuse for to sign a release, so we can talk freely about their care.
Vicki, maybe if I can impose on the two of you all afterwards, you could give me some contacts and phone numbers, and then I can send it out to everybody who's participating this evening.
Perfect.
Would that be okay?
Okay, that's no problem.
I really appreciate that. I want to thank you all. This has been a great program. Dr. Cuffee and Ms. Davis, you provided such enlightening and candid answers. And it really goes a long way to understanding the whole process. And Corporal Mullen, you did a great job moderating. Really do appreciate that too. This was a feast of facts. And if you were like me, you probably are not retaining everything that was said tonight. My head is spinning a little bit. So I do want to tell you that this has been recorded. It is going to go onto our website. So if you want to see it later, I would say by Monday at the latest, it will be up on our website, which is NAMI Coastal Virginia spelled out.org. You are certainly welcome to view it. And if you have friends and relatives who also would like to see it, it'll be up there for a long time. So you'll have access to that. I know I saw some questions in the chat box, and as I mentioned in the beginning of the program, we just don't have time. I'd love to spend more time doing this, but our presenters, our panelists have been so kind to give us an hour after their busy day, and Corporal Mullen as well, and I don't want to abuse that privilege. So we won't be able to answer those questions, but with the contact information that they are both going to be providing, hopefully you'll be able to get that information to be able to contact the person you need to and find the answer to your question. So I want to thank everybody once again for coming. Please keep NAMI Coastal Virginia in your minds for any kind of support group or class for both people who live with a mental health condition as well as their families. Everything NAMI does is free. And we are here to help you, to help the mental health community. So thank you and have a lovely evening.